Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching today's in-depth ag forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. Well, here on Thursday afternoon, May the 12th, we were watching a few features we've been paying close attention to all week. And the first is this cutoff low that's sneaking under the ridge across much of the eastern half of the country. And you can just see the center of circulation trying to just skirt right here. See it right there along the coast, and it's brought in a lot of cloud cover and some cooler weather through the Carolinas up toward the mid-Atlantic. It's also another interesting feature on this. There's been a boundary right here running north to south across this part of the U.S. from Wisconsin all the way down to Mississippi. And yesterday, some big storms blew up on it right here in this part of Illinois, dumping a lot of rain. And today, we can see them here. But the real action today is farther back to the west. I'll just take you over there to show you what's going on right now. So if we just take a look here at some of the latest satellite data, you can see the fire still in Mexico. But the storms that are popping right now on this main boundary here have the potential to be quite severe. And this is following the event yesterday, that large what we call mesoscale convective system that came out of, well, actually started in Texas, but made its way all the way to Minnesota last night, doing a lot of damage. We need to talk about this because it's quite important. Just this afternoon, looking at the Storm Prediction Center, they've issued what they call a Pds Watch. That's a particularly dangerous situation. That criteria in giving out this particular form of a watch comes at the discretion of the Storm Prediction Center employees. Okay, so when we look at it, though, it's for this particular region right through here, kind of centered on Sioux Falls. And as I was looking at it, one of the things that really caught my eye was that the primary threats include widespread damaging winds, gusts possibly at 105 miles an hour expected, and hail up to 2 inches in diameter. So this is a pretty serious event that's unfolding right now this afternoon. Now, the Storm Prediction Center has been on top of this for 4 days now, and you can see they've had this area identified, and they've expanded the area today where they do have the moderate risks. So we're watching these storms live right now popping in this area. So if you're catching the video early here on Thursday afternoon and evening, you're kind of right here with me in it. Now, that MCV I mentioned yesterday, mesoscale convective vortex, went straight from the south through the north and then developed over parts of Minnesota, where we saw, now we're approaching over 200 reports, or almost 200 reports of severe weather, including 6 tornadoes, all of them reported in Minnesota. There was some large hail and wind gusts over 80 miles an hour. So it's the same area, in fact, just back a little bit farther to the west of it, that's under the gun this afternoon. So please, I hope if you're watching this right as soon as I publish it, you're staying very weather aware in this particular area. Now, I would like to show you, in fact, let's get an update on this. There we go. This is how much rain fell out of that. Now, we've been talking about the substantial planting delays that have been going on in the northern plains, pockets throughout South Dakota, most of North Dakota, and Minnesota. Those storms last night in some places put down over 6 inches of rainfall, some places up to 7. And then if you follow the storms back down, this is the first time in a long time we've seen good moisture return, albeit from big storms coming into the panhandle of Texas, where they are still very much deep in drought. Now, just thinking about all of this, I want to show you quickly where we're expecting these storms to go this afternoon. So I'm going to start this right at 5 o'clock here, Central Time, and then you can see the storm complex right in through here. Well, we do expect these storms to move off of the frontal boundary, and that means they're going to become outflow dominated, and that's why there's the risk here for the damaging winds. But look at all the rain on the backside of this in North Dakota, parts of Montana, getting back into Wyoming. And so as that system in the overnight hours tonight just continues to pull north, it's going to send the severe weather through Minnesota once again and eventually over to Wisconsin. We're going to leave a frontal boundary right here late tonight. So what we're going to notice is by Friday early in the morning, getting into Friday afternoon, the main front will have moved itself all the way probably over to Illinois early in the morning. But we're going to have to watch later in the day, there it is, for the storms to kind of reignite along that front, stretching all the way back to Texas. So this is where we're going to be watching on Friday. As we play this on through, you're going to see the scattered convection over the southeast. Much of this is associated with that upper level low. And we're going to have to watch on Saturday for severe storms in this area as well. So that's just a quick rundown of what I'm expecting here through the next couple of days. I want to look at some bigger picture things, though. We're going to start off with the 12Z European model run on precipitation anomalies. A couple things to be discussing here. Planting windows, which had been open in the eastern Cornbelt, the mid-south, and parts of the western Cornbelt are about to close. We're going to be watching for storms to really fire up as soon as this weekend, but then next week on a boundary here. And the way that the jet stream's still coming into the Pacific Northwest, We're expecting above average precipitation in places that have been extremely wet. And the next couple of systems, in fact, the next 3 that I'm seeing are going to eject in the northern plains. And where we're really starting to have a problem here is with the flooding in this area, the very wet soils combined with the fact that we had major planting delays earlier from cold weather. We're starting to really push the limits on what we can get in this area. Now, you know that earlier in the year there was a lot of discussion about drought to the south. And what we're now seeing is that in both the near term and the longer term runs, the chances of going back over to a generally drier pattern with scattered severe convection in this area seems to be most likely. Okay, so there's a lot of things I think that are quite critical to this next 2 to 6 weeks before we even start to concern ourselves about the risk of summer drought, which I'll talk about in just a few moments. So we can see what's gone on lately, and we could probably spend an hour just looking at this map and discussing it. I won't do that to you. But there are places here in the northern plains that in the last 30 days are over 700% of normal on precipitation. The Pacific Northwest has been extremely wet, but this drought area still lingers. And what I'm going to have to watch is for expansion to happen here in the next 30 days or so. I think we're not going to get wide open windows, unfortunately, in the northern plains, even to finish the month of May. It is important to note this area right here, extremely agriculturally productive area in this part of Montana, has missed out on substantial amounts of precipitation. It's extremely dry there. And we've had pretty tight windows across the east up until this week when things have warmed up in this area. Okay, so just some perspective. On the temperature side of it, though, this is one of the bigger risks we're dealing with. Looking out there from the 19th through the 25th, this is what NOAA is looking at in terms of the risks. So notice where we're bringing in the risk of extreme heat. With that comes high evaporation. And as I just showed you, that was also the region that we are expecting to be drier. So I'm very concerned about that. There we go. One more. There we go. And then here in the Northwest, where we've had such brutally cold air, to see relief in that is not yet possibly going to be until we get into the 3rd week of May. And that's what I was bringing this map back up for. Just a reminder that since the beginning of April up until yesterday, the northern tier of the United States has seen much more colder weather than warm, and the Pacific Northwest is having a record cold start to their spring. Now, if you just want to see the temperatures really quickly here, quite a bit of warmth under the ridge remains, but you can already see the colder weather moving in over the next 5 days, and by day 5 through 10, this is where it's anchored. So this hits the Canadian prairie pretty hard, but notice how hot the temperatures are going to be down here compared to normal. We're going to be talking about triple digits in and around the Red River Valley of the South. Okay. Now from here, I want to extend this out and talk about some bigger picture things, and I want to just make you all aware of the things I'm watching both in the near term and the long term, and I want you to watch them with me. This La Niña, and it's the bit of a looser grip that it has right now is primarily because of, and it's taken me a little while to grasp this, but it's primarily because of a big move in the MJO that's tied to something called a convectively coupled Kelvin wave. Now, I'm going to be honest with all of you. That's something I don't fully understand how they work, but they move very quickly across the Indian Ocean out into the Pacific. What I am trying to understand, though, is I don't think it's going to do anything to slow down the longer-term risk of this La Niña sticking around. Here's the other piece. The water temperatures here have remained cold, and we've had a lot of discussion about this and the mid-summer drought risk in the midsection of the United States. So you need to watch with me these temperatures, because if they remain cool, the West Coast has reduced risk of severe extreme heat and drought this summer, while the Midwest has increased risk of drought development. If they warm, that's typically a signal that the atmosphere is responding in a way to flip that pattern. So we're still watching those things very carefully. But that MJO movement is important because you see how long the legs are here between each day. That tells you how fast that what we call convectively coupled Kelvin wave is moving. What I do expect is for this to crash back into null space once again. And here's the significance in that. Should the MJO come back after this event to null space or somewhere over the Indian Ocean, we don't get the full shift away from the pattern that we've been seeing. All right, and I want to talk about that, because if we see between now and the end of May more blues showing up in here, that would again tell me that this La Niña is picking up speed again. Now, if you remember on Monday, I thought we'd lost it. I thought it was kind of really starting to fade and back off. But I also told you I had no confidence in my own forecast. I've had a few days to think this over, and I'm going to continue to watch that. So what does all this mean, and are the models sniffing that out? Okay, so here we go. This was just released about 30-40 minutes ago, and it's now the new update from May 21st to June 21st, looking at precipitation anomalies. And even if you go week by week, it may not be until we get past the first week of June that this section of the country getting into the Canadian prairie actually sees a slowdown in the precipitation. And no, that's terrible news for this particular area. We've also now seen the model again show more aggressive drying in this area compared to normal, although I could make a statement that would say, despite that, we will still have convective events here. It's just not widespread rain. And then you start to see here that from the central Cornbelt into the Great Lakes, above average precipitation, this would be very consistent with a pattern that ejects systems north, and then they move through here and drag their fronts into this area. And I just don't have any indication right now to go against the European model. I don't see why I would say that this could be wrong. And that includes what we see over here in parts of the east, with the above average precipitation there. Now, just thinking about this and concerning myself, maybe overly so, with the redevelopment of drought in the midsection of the country, I started just thinking about a few things. And I'm going to be honest with you, I'm a bit worried that I'm looking for something rather than investigating. What I mean by that is I'm just worried because of model tendencies that the risk of drought this summer in the Midwest could be high. That's all. So if you feel as though I'm looking for something and finding it because I'm looking for it, I completely agree with you. But can I give you the analysis anyway? We know that there is no correlation month to month in the weather. In other words, if April does something, May doesn't have to do something because of that, and so on and so forth. But I got asked a question, and so I'm just going to go after it. The question is what's going on right now in April and May? When you look back at some of the heavy-hitting years, like here they are, for the Midwest and for the West, 12, 88, 83, and 76. Is there anything that's similar? So let's just do this just as a piece of information. This is not a forecast. It's just part of my analysis. Are we clear on that? You're going on this journey with me. Here's what we found. A lot of troughing in the Bering Sea to the Gulf of Alaska with ridging to the south. That's a strong jet in between. Okay. Then some sense of a block, high over low, in the Atlantic. Okay, that's the first piece. I then said, well, let's flip this over. Let's go pick those years like 09, 14, 16, 18. Those were Midwest years of, summer no drought while the West was hot. What did we see? Ridging from the Bering Sea into the Gulf of Alaska in April and May. And in the Atlantic, no block. See the big trough here? Fast moving jet stream there. All right, what do we have this year? So far, from April 1st to May 7th, we've got troughing in the Bering Sea toward the Gulf of Alaska. We have blocking from Greenland, into the North Atlantic. Now, I'm just looking for relationships, but I don't want to give them too much weight. Please understand that. I'm presenting what we've seen. And just to make a point about this, what about last year? Because if you remember, last year the La Niña faded fast in spring. And by the time we got to this point, from April to this point in May, we'd seen ridging here and ridging there. And if you remember, in June, all of the biggest ridging events were west. Remember all the heat that was west last year? So I'm asking myself, should I be keeping my concern about summer drought development in the Midwest, while the West and the East tend to see better precipitation and not such extreme heat? I'm asking myself, is anything happening now that's giving me that indication? And just based upon that analysis, I can't say that it's not continuing to keep my concern up. That's all I want to share with you, all right? Here's another piece to this. What about La Niña? Now, this is from the Bureau of Meteorology out of Australia. And I've shown you this before, but it's a comparison between the Australians, the Canadians, the Europeans, the Japanese, the French, the Americans, and the British. And what you're looking at here, if you put the line down the middle, this would be INSO-neutral conditions, or neither El Nino or La Nina. El Nino would be this side, La Nina would be that. From June, every one of these models underestimated except for NOAA. Every one of them underestimated what the La Nina is going to be doing. Here's July into August. It's normal for them to peel back, but they've all stayed on the cooler side of average. But by September and into October, most of the models regain the La Nina look, which means this could be a third year. So I'm just going to give you two pieces of information to be thinking about with me, all right? The first comes back to ocean temperatures. Please watch here and here. Secondly, we need to keep an eye on soil moisture. Now, we're very saturated north, and we're going to put more rain down there. Watch these maps, and I put them in my morning reports every morning. Watch these maps to see if this drought area regains a foothold, because we've had very heavy rainfall in places where there was drought that's beat it back, but I'm just concerned that over the next month that could reemerge. That's it. That's the story that I wanted to present to you. Let's get into the near-term forecast. Okay, red flag warnings, severe thunderstorm watch, and then this right here, there's that particularly dangerous situation. This is a tornado watch, flood warning to the north of that. And we're just looking at the the effect of this storm system coming through. So a reminder, here's today. This will be on Thursday. Getting tomorrow, we're going to watch right along this band. And as we go into the day on Saturday, as we saw earlier, this is our area of risk. So we've already covered that. Now, I would like to make a point that early next week, going into next week, there is quite a bit of unstable air that keeps pushing to the north. And given the deeper trough that might set up here, we need to watch out for this area and through here to have almost like a stationary front on which we're going to see repeated chances of daily storms. And that's bad, given that this area needs to continue with its rapid planting progress. Let's talk about it. So what we see here is the troughs in blue and the ridges in red. And this is the pattern we're dealing with to the end of the week. Now what you see is that over the weekend, the trough that was here over the west settles into the Great Lakes. And what this is going to do is leave a front right in through here. So it'll curl up into a low, that'll be there, but it'll leave a front right in place here, which will feed on Gulf moisture. Now we're going to do that while we wait on this next trough to come through. So next Monday into Tuesday and Wednesday, we're just going to see storms on that frontal boundary until this next system here on Wednesday comes diving into the northwest and sets us up with the classic pattern by the 21st of May. That's a trough through the Four Corners or through, the Intermountain West with a ridge in the southeast. So the flow comes in, feeds it, big storm system comes out, and I want to show you what that looks like. So here we go. Multi-model comparison. GFS on the left, European on the right. These are the 12Z runs today. Now we've already seen through Saturday. What I want you to be watching for is in through here in both maps. Okay, we're going to be watching for the rains to come in to possibly impact the planting progress here. Meanwhile, systems come into the northwest, and we're still dealing with on Saturday that pesky cutoff low that's been bringing in the precipitation I showed you at the beginning. So through Sunday into Monday, do you see how the models are bringing this through here? Okay, this is Sunday night, getting into Monday. What about Monday afternoon and evening, getting into Tuesday? Do you see how both models just keep bringing scattered storms through this area? Here's the next deep system we're watching coming in the Pacific Northwest. That's next Wednesday. It comes in here next Thursday, dives into the mountains by next Friday, and ejects for next weekend. Now, we got to be careful looking out this far, because I know you're going, wait a minute, is it going to snow here? I have no idea. I think the models are overdoing it, but we're going to watch it anyway. The whole point is to say that this pattern is quite active. So you just look at the next 7 days, and we see that systems are coming in here. The big ones eject like this, so very wet conditions remain where we've had all of our problems. We see this area is lighting up with more scattered storms, same thing the parts of the Mid-South, and where we're tending to stay drier with only scattered storms is where I'm worried about drought. We have the cutoff low that comes in and then eventually goes off like this, and that pretty much defines our next 7 days in total. Now remember, once we get into week 2, this is next Saturday, there's that deep trough, and it comes slicing through, heading back up to the Canadian Prairie. So what we end up getting here is that system comes through and ejects, and this whole region goes over wet, which is why I'm concerned that we may not get until the month of June before the northern plains and the southern Canadian Prairie actually make significant progress on planting. What I also don't like about this next system is that it could leave an open corridor in through here for a lot of severe storms. But again, that is pretty far out there in the forecast. That's next week, deep into next week that we're talking about there. All right. Okay, on the temperature side of things, if we do delay the planting in this area another couple of weeks, I made a map this morning that shows, going back to 1980, the number of times we accumulated more than 2,000 GDUs going between May 25th and October 15th. And what you find here in the northern plains, and by the way, we look at 2,000 GDUs because that would be about, maybe, 85-day corn needs about 2,000 GDUs. So what we see here is that about a third of the years don't make it to that number. So I'm just very concerned about our growers here in the northern plains and Canadian prairie on getting the heat that we need to get the crop out and going once it does get planted. Now, we're not at risk of a frost. All of that is west. That's what you see here in gray. Those deeper troughs in the west are keeping things cold. But take a look at the high temperatures here. We had heat advisories out in the Quad Cities today. Cold west, cold under the cloud cover here today on Thursday. Well, here's Friday. Getting into Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. That's the first system coming through. And then you see next Tuesday and Wednesday. Do you see it right there? In fact, let's just go back to Tuesday. This is where that lingering boundary sits, and that's where I'm watching for those storms next week to possibly roll on that boundary. Summertime heat to the south, high evaporation rates. Some places here we're talking about up to 3 inches in a week of evaporation, which is why we're worried about the drought risk south. Now, from there, let's just do a quick rundown of what we expect day 5 through 10, moving out to day 10 through 15 to look like. And what you're going to see is that the temperature pattern reflects that big trough coming in week 2, while from California through Texas to the east, we expect above average temperatures. Very quickly, I want to give you some international stuff to think about here. Oh, no, longer term stuff to think about here first. Through June, why I continue to get concerned about drought risk in the midsection of the country is the heat compared to average is expected to be highest by the models here, not over here. If it would have been here through June, we'd see the ridging developing west and a lot of storms running out of the northwest across the midsection of the country. Because of the heat possibly, and again, this is all forecast, but if it does set up here, we could be looking at a scenario going into early summer where our ridging sets up in the midsection of the country. And again, that just comes back to the dialogue I shared with you earlier about my risk looking forward on drought. Now let's do the long-term forecast, or the updated forecast for the rest of the world. Europe is going over quite hot, while the Russian wheat belt is still quite cold over to Kazakhstan. And during this time period, there will be places that really see dry conditions, although a lot of scattered storms in France and Germany, as you can see here. So I wanted to bring you up to speed here. We know that the summertime risk of drought development this particular year is elevated because of La Niña and some other global factors. I'm going to finish with South America, because since the end of April to the beginning of May, the Safrinha crop did finish with dry conditions, and it's not just that time period. Go back to all of April into May, really quite dry here. And even before that, the drought was there, which means we're seeing some of the numbers peel off of the higher values for this Safrinha crop. Now, over the next 10 days, through the Parana River, drier than average, just scattered storms north of it, and then right in through here, where we have that Safrinha crop, it's going to continue to finish dry. Places that are doing fine are right in between, right into this area. But there's risk once we get out there into next week that we could, and I'm just going to make this clear, there is a small chance that on the Safrinha crop that's growing down here in Parana, that's about 13% of the Safrinha crop in Parana where I put that arrow, that we could see the low temperatures here getting down into the mid to upper 30s Fahrenheit. And when we start to see that, I don't think there will be a frost, but I'm not going to leave it out of the discussion that we need to be watching it. Again, this is next week. Okay, we had a lot to cover today, a lot on my mind about this weather pattern, but I wanted to share it with you just to keep you aware of what I'm watching. Hope you all have a good week and weekend. I'll talk to you on Monday. Thanks.